Next on Currents News, the Supreme Court is taking up the rights of the unborn. Could it lead to a direct challenge to Roe v. Wade? Plus, members of the Brooklyn Diocese gather to celebrate life. We'll tell you about the annual Rosary for Life Mass. A hero police officer struck down in the line of duty is laid to rest at a Catholic church in Monroe, New York. And Bishop DiMarzio talks about one of the city's most beloved saints, Mother Cabrini. The Diocese of Brooklyn plans to honor her contributions despite being snubbed by the city. The news starts right now. Good evening, I'm Emily Druby. The highest court in the land will take up the abortion issue once again, agreeing to consider a challenge to a Louisiana abortion law that requires any doctor performing abortions to have admitting rights at a nearby hospital. It is the first abortion challenge to make it to the Supreme Court since it shifted to a conservative majority. An abortion case has made its way to the Supreme Court. The justices will consider a Louisiana law that requires any doctor performing an abortion must also have admitting rights at a nearby hospital, which the state says is needed to provide a higher level doctor if necessary. Critics of the law say it would restrict access to abortions, the plaintiff claiming it would shut down 2 of the state's 3 abortion clinics. Back in 2016, a nearly identical case out of Texas was struck down when Justice Anthony Kennedy sided with the liberal justices. But the High Court has changed since that decision was made.
So help me God.
This abortion case will be the first to be argued since Justices Brett Kavanaugh and Neil Gorsuch joined the bench, their appointments solidifying a conservative majority on the court. While the Louisiana case doesn't directly challenge Roe v. Wade, it is inspiring hope among pro-life advocates. Christian Rada, the director of Respect Life Education for the Diocese of Brooklyn, calls it a small step to one day overturning the decision, adding it'll show those who fight for the voiceless that they are making a change.
And it could be a way for pro-lifers to see that what they're doing out in the streets, in the grassroots, is actually affecting public policy and judicial rulings. Also praying that, that God will enlighten them to see that these laws need to be in place in order to protect the most vulnerable.
Oral arguments could begin early 2020 with a decision expected sometime in June during the height of the presidential election season. Back in Brooklyn, hundreds of Catholics are asking for the Blessed Mother's intercession to stop the killing of the unborn. Rosary for Life is an international group that has been praying for the end to abortion for over a quarter of a century. Currents News' Katie Anguser reports on the Mass held at Resurrection Church in Garrettson Beach, Brooklyn.
One voice, one prayer, for those too young to speak for themselves. A Rosary for Life, done by the international group by the same name, who every year for the past 27 years prays that the sin of abortion will be stopped forever.
When you pray with faith, God grants you your prayer.
This year's Rosary is needed more than ever before, as the passing of the Reproductive Health Act removes nearly all restrictions on abortion right up to the moment of birth, and just days after Planned Parenthood announced the opening of a mega clinic in Illinois.
We are in the midst of the place where we have to give witness, very courageously and very clearly.
Bishop Frank Caggiano of Bridgeport, Connecticut helps lead the Pro-Life Legion, the Brooklyn native explaining that the only way to stop abortion is with faith.
We're going to win this battle. Christ is going to do it. It's not your efforts or mine alone. It's Christ through us.
Vicar General of Brooklyn, Bishop Raymond Geppetto, celebrated a Mass to honor the over a quarter century of praying for the end of this culture of death. Bishop Geppetto says no one is better equipped for this battle than the Virgin Mary.
Our Blessed Mother is a wonderful protector of life. She brought life into the world, our life, our hope, our strength, and our peace, Jesus Christ.
Drawing strength from Christ, their rosaries, and faith, the Diocese of Brooklyn continues to fight for the rights of the unborn. Katie Anguser, Currents News.
While at the Rosary for Life, Bishop Caggiano spoke with Currents News about the recent findings of an independent investigation of clerical sex abuse in the Diocese of Bridgeport, Connecticut. The review found significant reforms are now in place, but that prior Bridgeport bishops were more concerned with protecting the diocese than in paying attention to abuse survivors. Bishop Caggiano was praised for making significant reforms. He says now he's looking towards the future.
It's a very sad and painful story. Now, my hope is that having had this accounting and having learned what we've learned as a church and how we have changed in the last 18 years, now it's the time to rebuild the church. It's time to go forward. And one of the great ways is to recommit ourselves to young people and young adults. They are the very ones who are hurt, and yet they are very much at the heart of the church. So that's my hope.
The bishop adding that rebuilding outreach and trust is a top priority. We will have more of Bishop Caggiano's interview on Monday's edition of Currents News. Thousands of fellow officers joined family and friends today to say farewell to an NYPD officer, Brian Mulkeen, who was killed in the line of duty. Funeral services were held at the Church of the Sacred Heart in Monroe. The fallen hero was killed by friendly fire over the weekend during a confrontation in the Bronx. Turning now to the impeachment controversy roiling the nation's capital, President Trump took time today to focus on the economy instead. Karen Kafer reports on the latest from Washington.
Under the cloud of an intensifying impeachment inquiry by House Democrats, President Trump highlighting the new jobs report.
3.5% unemployment, and that is a tremendous number, the lowest in over 50 years.
The 3.5% unemployment rate reported by the Labor Department Friday is the lowest since December 1969. U.S. employers added 136,000 jobs. But that's another slowdown in hiring, which averaged 223,000 new jobs per month last year.
What people really want to look at is how many jobs can this economy create on any given month, and is that increasing or decreasing? And clearly right now that's decreasing, as is just about everything, because of the U.S.-China trade war and a slowdown in manufacturing.
Manufacturing jobs declined in September as a key manufacturing index also dipped to a 10-year low. Businesses concerned about the trade war with China. The White House preparing for more talks next week.
I think the Chinese rhetoric has been positive. So is ours.
In addition to tariffs on Chinese imports, a round of new tariffs hitting European goods, things like wine and cheese, is set to take effect this month. Retailers gearing up for the biggest season of the year, eyeing the uncertainty. Still, a National Retail Federation forecast released Thursday projects an increase in holiday sales of about 4% over last year. In Washington, Karen Kafer, Currents News.
Just days before the start of the Amazon Synod, Pope Francis taking part in a unique symbolic tree planting ceremony along with indigenous peoples from the Amazon and placing the Synod under the protection of St. Francis of Assisi. Rachel Dobrinski reports on the unique event from Rome.
On St. Francis's Day, the Vatican Gardens were host to an unusual scene. The Pope came to pray with his group of indigenous from the Amazon. Their emotion was visible as they spoke of what they expect for the upcoming synod.
Nuevos caminos. Hacer una iglesia que es compañera, amiga, que nos escuche.
They left these tapestries on the grass. On them were faces of religious people murdered in Brazil for denouncing the abuses suffered by indigenous populations. The Pope wanted to sit among cardinals rather than in the seat of honor. Throughout the ceremony, he maintained a profound attitude of recollection. The dances marked the start of the meeting. The indigenous representatives gave various presents to Pope Francis. Then the event organizers stepped in to explain the significance of the ceremony. As religious sang St. Francis's Song of the Creatures, the Pope planted this tree from Assisi. At the end, the Pope prayed the Our Father to close the meeting. It will be his last meeting before the Synod, which will open on Sunday and last until the end of October. In Rome, Rachel Dobrinski, Currents News.
The judge who sentenced Amber Guyger to 10 years in prison for shooting her neighbor is now in the headlines herself. Why? Because the judge gave the former police officer a Bible. Judge Tammy Kemp received a complaint from the Freedom from Religion Foundation. The group stated that the judge's actions were inappropriate and unconstitutional. They want the Texas State Commission on Judicial Conduct to investigate the incident. There's a lot more news headed your way. Bishop DiMarzio is here to talk about Mother Cabrini and what the Diocese of Immigrants is doing to honor the popular saint. And as rents soar, Brooklynites are being separated from their beloved parishes, but one couple is changing that. And some out-of-state missionaries are taking their message of Christ's love to the streets. We'll explain coming up. Do you have a story idea or want to share a tip? Email us at newstips@desalesmedia.org or call our 24-hour number 718-517-3122. We'll be right back. This weekend, the Diocese of Brooklyn is banding together to honor a beloved saint during a yearly procession celebrating Italian-American heritage. Mother Cabrini was overwhelmingly chosen by the people of New York City for a top honor to receive a statue as part of a city campaign called She Built NYC. But Mother Cabrini was snubbed when the First Lady of New York didn't pick the saint. In response, the Italian Ministry of the Diocese of Brooklyn is dedicating the March and Mass to the contributions Mother Cabrini made to build the city. The events will take place on Sunday, October 6th, with a procession from Brooklyn's Mother Cabrini Park to a Mass at Sacred Heart St. Stephen Church. Pick up a copy of the tablet to find all the details. Bishop Nicholas DiMarzio is leading the effort to get the city to honor Mother Cabrini. He sat down with Ed Wilkinson to talk about it for this week's Into the Deep. Ed?
Thank you, and we're here with Bishop DiMarzio. Today we're going to talk about Mother Cabrini. Bishop, you're going to be leading a big procession and liturgy on Sunday,
Yes.
and it's going to be in honor of Mother Cabrini because of a controversy that has developed.
Right,
Tell us about that.
Every year we do have a celebration of the Italian apostolate, and this year choosing Mother Cabrini to be the statue we carry in procession and the subject of our Mass. As you know, the city is putting up statues to women. Seems to be a lack of women in statuary around the city, and so they actually had a kind of a contest or a testing to see who people think. And actually, Mother Cabrini got the most votes out of all the people that they're proposing, and they're ignoring her. They're saying, well, she didn't make the grade, whatever the criteria was. So certainly she was a woman of stature, a woman of her own thinking, and it wasn't subservient to anybody. But so we're lacking a statue of Mother Cabrini in New York. Yeah. We're going to start a campaign to erect our own statue. Not that Mother Cabrini really would like a statue, I think, but it's the point of immigrants of today needing more than ever a patron of immigrants, where they're being so misunderstood, mistreated. She understood the problem, over 100 years ago, and today we have the same kind of problem of mentality that doesn't understand we have to welcome the stranger, whatever condition they're in. So we will launch that campaign this Sunday.
Yeah. Now, who was Mother Cabrini? Maybe a lot of people might not be familiar with her. She worked right here in our own diocese.
Right. She was a religious sister. She, started very young in her life. She started a religious community in Italy with the intention of going to China. And she had an audience with Leo XIII, who said, no, don't go east, go west. Because just the year before, he had written a letter to the American bishops explaining his concern about the Italian immigrants who he felt were not being served well. They didn't have priests. They weren't really being welcomed. And so he said, go to the United States. That's where we need your help. And she did. And she created many in different cities, not only in New York. This Sunday we will go actually to the first place she went to in New York City, Brooklyn.
Right.
It was Archbishop Corrigan, who she kind of had some difficulties with, but Corrigan said, go to Brooklyn. It was Bishop McDonald, who was his secretary, who was then the Bishop of Brooklyn, and he accepted her very well. She praised him all different kinds of ways. Started the school there, named it after him, St. Charles School. His name was Charles McDonald. So it's a good story that began in Brooklyn. We always were a diocese of immigrants, and right from the beginning.
And the place where the procession will begin is down there in Carroll Gardens, and it's the place where her chapel used to be. It's not there anymore, but there's a public park there named in her honor, and that'll be the starting point
That's
for the
right,
procession.
and we'll go from there to the church.
To Sacred Heart St. Stephen's,
Right.
which is right there in the neighborhood. Now, that was a very predominantly Italian parish, but it's a changing neighborhood today, right? But these things are good. It's a good sign, I think, to the larger community.
There are the people come from all over the diocese. We have about 16 buses that have already told us they're coming. Well, that's about 50 a bus. That's a good amount of people, but at least it's a large church, so I think we'll fill it. And we want to honor her memory, but also what she taught us, that welcoming the stranger is really part and parcel of our faith.
And like you say, she probably wouldn't even want a statue. And we have many religious statues to Mother Cabrini around the diocese.
Right.
But why is it important then that we do
Well,
have a
there's some
public
kind of
sign?
public manifestation that this is a woman who devoted her life to helping immigrants, and we need people today to do the same thing.
And you will be preaching and talking about Mother Cabrini
Yes,
on Sunday?
in English and Italian.
Okay, and the liturgy is mostly in Italian, I think.
The liturgy will be in Italian. The sermon will be bilingual.
Okay, Bishop, thanks so much. We'll all be there watching you.
Okay.
And good luck with that. Back to the news desk.
Thank you, Ed and Bishop DiMarzio. Once again, as the bishop said, that walk in honor of Mother Cabrini will take place this Sunday, October 6th, from Brooklyn's Mother Cabrini Park to Sacred Heart St. Stephen Church. Pick up the tablet for more details. And Sacred Heart St. Stephen Church is central to our next story as well, as we look back at some of our most memorable stories. As every New Yorker knows, rents can be sky high in the Big Apple, forcing many people to move away from where they've lived for so many years, leaving behind the parishes where they practice their faith. It happened to one Catholic couple who refused to cut their ties with their church, even if it meant an extra sacrifice. Hundreds of people packed Sacred Heart St. Stephen Church Sunday morning. The church located in Carroll Gardens, Brooklyn, but many of these parishioners are not.
The Son and of the Holy Spirit.
Like the Delgados, they're up early on Sunday, preparing for their hour and 15-minute commute from Mount Vernon to Brooklyn to attend church. Lifelong parishioner Michael and his wife Elise call Sacred Heart St. Stephen their second home. So what made them move over an hour away? Price.
We couldn't find anything affordable in Brooklyn. The prices have gone up so much.
Much like the rest of Brooklyn, this neighborhood of Carroll Gardens has been in the process of gentrifying for years. Neighborhood changes and renovations causing housing prices to skyrocket. According to NYU's Furman Center, the median gross rent in the neighborhood jumped from $1,660 in 2006 up to $2,280 in 2017, making it one of the most expensive neighborhoods anywhere in the city. The numbers following a pattern of rising housing prices throughout Brooklyn.
We're seeing it in Crown Heights, we're seeing it in parts of Flatbush, certainly downtown Brooklyn.
Judith DeSena, a gentrification expert and sociology professor at St. John's University, says working against families are not only the rising costs, but a boost in roommates willing to live together and share expenses.
We're seeing more and more of unrelated adults living together. They pool their money, right? Families can't compete with that.
For years, parishioners of Sacred Heart St. Stephen have been feeling the effects of the gentrification of Carroll Gardens and Brooklyn as a whole. Colleen Trajano and her family left because of rising housing prices.
Yeah, my husband grew up here. We raised our children here. And just the history of the neighborhood where rising prices had to come in, and we ended up moving out to Staten Island.
But what's remarkable about this congregation is that a longer commute hasn't prevented these families from coming back, like the Delgados.
It's not just you're going to church, to praise God or, to praise Jesus. It's also to just pray together as a family. It's like you go visit your family every week. I visit my mom every week. So it's like in the sense, it's for me, it's the same thing.
The church's pastoral associate John Heyer explains why the faithful are up for the extra sacrifice.
It's about people. It's about the relationships that we have with each other, that we have with Christ, and that we experience together as a community.
Although rising housing prices may be sending families to new homes, the faith community remains strong. Still to come on Currents News, visiting missionaries from Maryland take a leap of faith on the streets of Brooklyn, talking to people face to face and urging them to give God a chance. That story when we come back. And please check out one of the latest features in the tablet, the Our Diocesan Family page. That's where you can send in photos of your family receiving certain sacraments, such as baptism, First Communion, confirmation, and marriage. For more information and to submit your pictures, go to thetablet.org/OurDiocesanFamily. We'll be right back. Welcome back to this special edition of Currents News. Religious brothers and sisters from Maryland were on a mission in the Big Apple recently. They pounded the pavement for close to 2 weeks, talking to people face to face, trying to convince them to give the church a chance. Currents News' Tim Harfman reports.
On the streets of Brooklyn, religious men and women have one goal: bringing people closer to Christ.
It's been a few days, but we see fruits.
They're part of the Order, the Institute of the Incarnate Word. Nearly 40 brothers and sisters traveled from Maryland to serve the Brooklyn Diocese for 2 weeks, knocking on doors and walking the city streets to invite people to church.
What we want to do is share, like Pope Francis said, the joy of the gospel. So on the street, to show a smile, even just listening.
The Curbside Catholics also handing out flyers with events at St. Teresa of Avila Church and the Co-Cathedral of St. Joseph.
What I tell them sometimes when they kind of like feel like, you know, we don't come here to condemn you, we don't come here to judge you, you know, we come here to tell you that the doors of the church are always open for you.
Brother Simone Magana is one of the missionaries meeting residents face to face. Today he meets Marie Kelly. Walking her dog Mimi, she admits she turned away from the church in college.
The Catholic dogma kind of got to me a lot, and I know there's been a lot of changes and a lot of improvement. The message at the time from the Catholic Church just wasn't resonating with me.
She's finding Christ again, thanks in part to her interaction with these brothers.
Now that I know that I feel like I need some more spirituality and God in my life, I think that, you know, at least going back to what I was raised with might help me start on the right path.
Marie's story reminds Brother Simon of another interaction he had a few days ago. One woman saw him as a godsend.
She's all like, every time somehow I need it or I'm going kind of like astray, somehow God sends a sign or someone or something, and this time it was you.
A sign to reinvigorate the pews of the borough of churches.
St. Teresa's around the corner from my apartment, so that makes it really easy. We walk by it at least 3 times a day.
Marie says come Sunday, she might just stop in, and that would fulfill the goal of the missionaries from Maryland. In Crown Heights, Tim Harfman, Currents News.
That is Currents News. I'm Emily Drewby. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time.